Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sat means truth, is a Sanskrit root word. Sattology means science of truth, study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science of fake lie imagination or study of fake lie imagination. In these shows, we strictly focus on the historical aspect because history teaches us a lot. And believe me, one day we will compete with the History Channel globally because we want to make sure that the Indian scholarly consensus comes up, which challenges the Western scholarly consensus because Indians are more in number. It's period. It's three times the number. So without delay, let us get started. I have a very, very special guest who is always there. He's a great Rishi, Muni, Tapasvi, and also a wonderful researcher with original research of his own. And let us welcome Sri Nilesh Nilkant Oak.
Namaskar Aditya ji, happy to be on your show.
Yeah, welcome. Always welcome, Nilesh ji. So Nilesh ji, one question is truckers protest in Canada, which is, I find it very impressive, is I find it following the Mahatma Gandhi's peaceful protest. And every democratic society, especially those who lecture others on human rights, they have to allow peaceful protest. But what we are seeing in Canada is exactly opposite. We are seeing a physical attack on these people. Their water is stopped. They are not supposed to. They are not. The law enforcement in Canada is stopping their gas deliveries so that they can stay cold. They become cold and they leave. And these are the same people who are lecturing Indian farmers protest. And farmers protest actually desecrated Republic Lal Killa of India, Delhi. They killed so many people. The hands were chopped off. The violence was done against people. So why these double standards? So my question is, Kolaveridi.
Well, I mean, there are so many details to this, but I think what these truckers, what you call, group going to Ottawa, what it did, and it's in a way sad that they have to do this. Now their objective is different, and that's a very good objective too. The methods and means, I mean, I would not get into it because I also think if people do this in a way where it disrupts the local administration, like, whether it's in Delhi or Ottawa, I mean, there are practical challenges. These things can get violent. I mean, this is not the first time. This has happened in many places. So those possibilities exist. So I will not go into the methods and means, but whatever has happened has provided a wonderful illustration of the, what you can say, the ignorance, the arrogance, and the naivete of current Canadian Prime Minister. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you know, I mean, I'm a Canadian. I'm a Canadian citizen too. I have voted in Canadian elections. And when I was up in Canada, I used to follow Canadian politics. I don't follow it as much. But number of people who are listening, they may or may not know. I mean, his father, Pierre Trudeau, going back and from the liberal side of things. But, these are labels. So let's not even go liberal and all that. Michael Moore, when he wrote the book White Stupid Men, in that, he wrote the best Republican president. And if you have read that, he says best Republican president, and then he said Bill Clinton, which is to say sometimes the label may be different, but what policies you follow and so on, that matters. But Pierre Trudeau was very shrewd. And I think the current prime minister is also extremely shrewd in the sense of political power and keeping oneself in power and all that. Whereas the Pierre Trudeau, his father, did a different kind of strategy. This guy is definitely woke. I mean, with everything that, a very confused woke, I would say. Everything that he has done for Canada. I mean, again, people can have different opinions as I see it. Even his intention may be right. Okay, when he came to power the first time and the way he was trying to form his ministry, the diversity, intention may be right, but actual implementation right then and there was a disaster. Now he would think otherwise, I'm sure. So Aditya ji, these particular truckers, symbolic morcha there has its own intention, but as far as I see it, there are many positives possibly of this, but I see it is at this has truly exposed this utterly incompetent and foolish Prime Minister of Canada. And his comments, as you may be aware, when these not truckers, the so-called farmers, not true farmers of India, but the rich folks who were actually using the true farmers as practically slaves on the Indian farms, when they were trying to do this against the current government, supported, financed by all breaking India forces, this guy either deliberately, ignorantly, or in his naivete was talking all kinds of stuff, nonsensical stuff, how he wanted to support, how he stood in support of the democracy and all that BS when they were going towards Delhi. Now, this has, in a simple language, and if you need to edit, you can do that. But this has basically the truckers morcha in Ottawa has come back to bite his ass. Okay, if you need to delete, you can do that afterwards. And basically, it also again shows the law of karma. It may take some time, but it will come and will repay you with interest.
I normally don't promote my book, but there was a book, Karma is a Bitch, I wrote, very popular in the USA. And people can learn all about karma over there. And it's an American slang. Karma is a bitch. Anyway,
Yeah.
so the second point which I would like to bring is, why not see, you and I are individuals. We are fighting individuals. We are just coming and researching, and it's a Sattology is just a non-profit. Uh, there is no Indian scholarly consensus. I would like to say BHUs, IITs, all the big universities of India or the national universities, whatever forum they have, they need to start challenging our history versus your version of history. And that's where the Indians need to start talking about the human rights of natives of Canada, natives of USA, and natives of South America, because they have no voice today at the academic level. At the academic level is just a very Eurocentric Western view of things. What is your view on that? Indian scholarly consensus versus Western scholarly consensus.
Okay, so two aspects to that. One, or even possibly three, like why Indian scholars are not responding, number one. Why there is no Indian scholarly consensus, number two. And then the third one I am adding is the strategic side of things, or understanding strategy, comprehending strategy. So the first one, why there is no, why are they not responding? Because most of them, there are, of course, notable exceptions everywhere. But most, in an Indian context, like for example, now Meenakshi Jain, like where would you put her? Like, of course, she was in academia, but she's a very, very balanced, Sanyami, wonderful researcher. So whether in academia or not, it really doesn't matter. But the way with a very grounded intellect, grounded mind, she's exploring and writing, researching the history of India of last, say, 2000 years, and she may be going beyond that, is very admirable. So there is a response, but she may not be in the academia in a very typical sense. The majority of the others are clueless. I mean, I'm talking again directionally in the humanities areas, but frankly, that applies everywhere. So I'm not like taking an exception. Most of them are clueless. Most of them are very lazy. Most of them lack courage. Now, look how generalized statements I'm making. Actually, I'm talking of the majority there. And somebody doesn't agree with it. I mean, yeah, they can actually come to your show, or I mean, if they want to, it's totally voluntary whether they want to do it or not, and says, Nilesh, you are wrong. Actually, look, here is an example. And as I said, there are notable exceptions. But if you look at the majority, it is they are not courageous. They don't want to do the tapasya that is required to respond to the Western hegemony and so on. So that is one reason. That is another point. The next one you ask is the consensus. Now, anytime you hear a consensus, whether it's a consensus of Indian scholars or consensus of a Western scholars, one should be immediately go on the alert for this reason. Now, in some cases, the consensus is, yeah, I mean, it's like which restaurant we should go to tonight. Yeah, we can take a consensus, which feels like, okay, let's pick three, Indian, Italian, Mexican. And then you say, how many first for Italian? So 20 peoples, we just take a vote and we say, okay, all right, so Italian is decided. Now, which restaurant? And suggest three. In that sense, the consensus is actually very useful too. In understanding the truth, in truly knowing what is the Sat, okay, or even Rut, the consensus is a extremely dangerous thing, extremely inefficient, actually a very wrong thing to use, whether Indian scholarly consensus or a Western scholarly consensus. That's what many people, many academics are stuck in. They confuse the consensus for the truth. So I would not encourage even the Indian scholars to build a consensus, and even the Western scholars. I mean, they are especially humanities, and as it relates to the Indian civilization, I mean, it's a utter nonsense. Okay. Now the last part, the strategic one. Now there, I would agree with you that not that I disagreed with you before. I just said what I think of consensus, but and that's a problem that I see in social media. Sometime, actually, not sometime, all the time. In fact, all the posts that I do, and by the way, Aditya, I should mention that in all social media, even in the past, like maybe 40% of the posts that may come through my handle, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, they were done by some volunteers who assist me. And with all the things that now I'm doing, actually that number is going to go up. So we just had a talk yesterday, and the 2-3 people who helped me, the discussion was like they will take over 80% plus of what gets posted through my handles, both on Twitter and Facebook, and even sometimes emails. Actually, I'm giving them a couple of email accounts to handle. The point I'm mentioning that is the last one, the strategic one. All my posts, or I would say majority of them, that are posted in the social media always have a purpose. Now, see, this is the nature of a design of experiments conducted in a social aspect. If you are conducting an experiment with, say, cooking, the food is not going to, we at least based on our limited knowledge, the food is not going to know, Nilesh is going to, after putting me, like, say, Brussels sprouts, or he's going to put a garam masala as opposed to some other Madras curry powder or something. It doesn't know that, at least we assume. In case of a social media, social experiments, and I'm doing design of experiments in the corporate setting for more than 20, 25 plus years. But I do that on in the social media. I find it very useful. And therefore, in social media, though, when I post something, I cannot tell why I'm posting this, what's the objective, what kind of responses I should get. No, actually, that is the idea, to see what kind of responses I get. And that tells me the maturity of the audience who is possibly following me, who is interacting with my post. And I would say, of course, again, there are notable exceptions, which is great. And I'm very thankful to them. A majority actually responds in a very ignorant, crass way. Most of them simply do not understand the objective of the post. They will go on some tangent and so on. So that is one reason, actually, I said I shouldn't be interacting and shouldn't be wasting that much time, although I will still interact 20%. So just to conclude on that strategic aspect, the strategic aspect is different than what exactly you are saying. Sometimes, because of the strategic nature of what you're trying to achieve, you may not tell the whole truth. Okay, although you may know it, you may say it in such a way that the person may, listener may feel like the person is compromising. Or why did you not also say that? Well, because it's a part of the strategy not to say everything. That happens in conversation, that happens in discussions, that happens in negotiations. I mean, that's just given. Many people simply do not understand the strategic aspect of it. So my point is, as a strategic aspect, the Indian scholarly consensus has a place, has a value, it has a place. And as you said correctly, it does not exist, or it is extremely in a weak state. And the reason, I think, is because most of them are very lazy. They will just hear something, turn to make some story out of it and talk about it. Many are like very busy, becoming popular, famous in a hurry. And those are some of the challenges. And others are extremely lazy. And the another thing, just last point, another point I see is, again, this could be true everywhere, but just like getting a, what you call, I'm not getting the word, but like a established position in academia. Those people who are in academia, their position is kind of like safe. They are going to retire right in that position. They just don't think. Most of them, again, there can be exception. Most of them don't think of doing anything original, any hard work, nothing. Chal raha hai na, let it go. So it's a very sad story. Therefore, I do believe even number of these sectors in India can be open as like a somewhat private sector, not totally private. Government should have some control, but there should be a correlation between the performance and their position, or their remuneration, and so on. Otherwise, if they know that doesn't matter what they do or they don't do, their position is fixed, they are continuing to going to get money, and they might even get promotion, like that Babugiri, then nothing, not much original research will come out of it. And part of that is this consensus. Why waste time? Just live the life. That is the thinking I think I have with many academics, especially in the humanities. Yeah, in India. And of course, here, these guys are humanities folks here, especially related to Southeast Asia. They are funded by Breaking India Elements, you know.
Good point. You said a very lengthy answer. It revealed so many things
Sorry,
about.
my apologies.
We can get started with the presentation and
Yeah.
then we'll work on.
Correct. See, it's never known what kind of questions you are going to ask, so I don't come prepared. Per se. And that's the fun of it, by the way, because we shouldn't be prepared in the sense of it should not be like all decided what we are going to talk or anything. Let me start sharing. So today, what I want to talk about, and some of the feedback that I see occasionally on your channel, or when it comes on the YouTube, and I would encourage those folks to continue to give a feedback. Also, Aditya ji, I would encourage them to, for a given specific video, the questions they should ask must be related to what is being discussed in that video, and not like generic. So if it's a generic, I mean, as I said, I'm not even going to use my own social media handles. I mean, I'm going to get less and less in terms of responding to the emails or these kind of comments. But I do scan when the time permits, and I'm very interested in getting some intelligent questions, some sharp questions that leads to the growth of knowledge. But other wasteful questions, or the people who have not bothered to read my books or watch other videos. Many people, Aditya, you may realize, they will ask a question for which the answer is given in that very video that you and me created, but they have not watched the video and they have asked the question. We should ignore such questions anyways. So today I thought we will talk how to draw proper conclusions, which is, if you see in our Darshana Shastra tradition, it's called Anuman. Okay, inference, how to draw proper inference, how to draw proper conclusion based on all the discussion, all the analysis, all the evidence, objective testing of that evidence, understanding that certain evidence is not objectively testable, which means the conclusion that we draw is not conclusive. Okay, think of it. Conclusion that we draw is not conclusive. Just not to confuse, we'll say the inference we draw is not conclusive if the evidence is not objectively testable. That is the foundation of modern science, and that is the foundation of Indian civilization, the Vedic civilization, the Hindu civilization. How to draw proper conclusions? We will look at through taking illustrations via archaeology, tradition, and epigraphic evidence. And Aditya feel free to interrupt me as we go through each of these, because that's when we discuss, I think it becomes a lot easier for people to understand it better, grasp that point better, and we can go through some additional examples besides what I am covering here. Now, I picked these three because there are many others, by the way, and over time we might do that. This is where many of the common folks, but many of the so-called researchers are very much stuck. Okay, so are these all three areas that I have selected for discussion today important? Yeah, they're absolutely important. Is this the evidence from these three traditions or three different disciplines? Is that useful? Absolutely. We will talk about that. But we will also understand the limitations of it and how, again, because of ignorance, because of incompetence, because of sometimes arrogance, okay, and because of naivete. I mean, all of these factors or a combination of it is at play when these so-called researchers draw conclusions. And we will also look at how wrong conclusions they draw. So these three, let's go into the first one, archaeology. Okay, well, archaeology is a huge field. Many people, unfortunately, are still stuck in pots and pans, as the term I use. But let's look at something, that's especially in the Indian context again. And that's something, I find very frustrating, personally frustrating. The reason is every time you try to take uh, our folks to something towards greater knowledge, something towards more logical reasoning, something towards more scientific way of validating things, they will come back. It's like they don't want to spend their time. They will come back to some of the dogma they are hanging on to. One of them, I would say social mind, if you want to call it, is archaeology. Now, is archaeology useful? Absolutely. In what way it is useful? I'm taking this example. At the top, what you are seeing is known as painted gray ware pottery. Okay, so it's painted, as you can see the paintings on those shards, the pottery shards, like the broken pieces. It's painted, and generally the color is a sort of a, broadly speaking, in a gray. That has to do with the kind of clay that was used, or maybe the color pigments that they employed in painting this pottery. Okay. So what does that tell us? And first thing, if we can date those potteries, we will not go into how they are dated. We will assume that dating is correct. If anyone has an objection, the person has to do some tapasya, do the work, and find out if the dating is not correct, why it is not correct, and so on and so forth. If they have a doubt, samshay about it, we will take the dating as is. Okay, that's not to say that there may not be errors. So this kind of pottery, at least based on whatever is explored, is found. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner map of India, wherever you see these all cities listed with the dots, that is the area, different places, so Ropar, okay, Bhagwanpura, all the way going to Rajasthan, going up to Haryana, all the way to Punjab, Delhi, Uttar Pradesh. Okay, I mean, that all area you have found this pottery. When they dated, what is the timing of that? The dating, and now since then they have found even pottery going back to some older times. Okay, but let's stick with what we have here. So the painted gray ware pottery is dated from 1200 BC to 500 BC. In what way it is useful? Well, think of it. I mean, unless we have some other evidence that can take us to a particular time period, the very fact this pottery exists, colorful pottery, okay, work of human beings, and dated to say 1200 BC, just let's take 1200 BC for simplicity. So that's what, 3000 years ago. So we know that 3000 years ago in this part of India, there were human beings living there using this kind of pottery, had a sense of art, they were painting them, and obviously they must be using it for different purposes, okay, a ritual purposes, but also living their life, to store things and so on and so forth. Yeah, so it is very useful. Now, where it gets problematic? It gets problematic if someone starts thinking, and you know what? Some of our otherwise famous archaeologists have done this. For example, you may know Professor B.B. Lal, and he's been decorated with, he's doing a lot of archaeology work for 70 plus years. Now I think he's close to 100 years, and has done a lot of hard work, okay, in terms of taking this discipline of archaeology further, and has someone who has shown with evidence the utter foolishness of Aryan invasion theory, okay, and for that we all ought to be thankful to him. Another great work he also did is with the establishment or related to the Ram Janmabhoomi issue, that he showed that actually there were temple and layers of temples below which were destroyed, and then the mosque was built. Again, that was a very objective evidence for the recent issue of Ram Mandir. However, to err is human, okay? And in this particular context, what he did is in around 1950s or so, with the limited resources he had, he and his team started excavating things in this area. And one of the somebody, I don't know all the details. I have all his books, but there was a thing. Okay, let's do some archaeology, excavation and see what we find about our civilization. So some of the places he and his team chose was near Kurukshetra, like the Ropar, for example, in Punjab area or that area. Then Delhi, which is understood as the Indraprastha from the Mahabharata times. And then some later Purana and later generations, there is a reference to Kausambi, comes in a Purana, by the way, not in the Mahabharata. And where there is a reference that the capital from Hastinapur was moved to Kausambi. So suddenly people hear Hastinapur, it's like a Dwarka, and then people think of Krishna. But guess what? Dwarka exists even today. Dwarka existed 1,000 years ago, maybe different places. There is a place called Mula Dwarka. In fact, there are 3 places with the Mula Dwarka. Okay, there is a place called Hastinapur today. Kurukshetra exists today. Thanesar and Thaneshwar, they exist today. They existed in a Mahabharata times, and they existed before that. Kuru Jangala, going back to 14,000 years ago. But here is where the mistake was made. So when they did excavations in Kurukshetra, in Meerut, the Hastinapur area, Delhi or that area, and then further south or further southeast in the Uttar Pradesh, they found these kind of potteries. Well, and they dated it. So 1200 BCE, for example. Okay, what does that tell? Which is what I told you. That is, there were people living in that time and they were using this kind of pottery. It's a great information about our civilization that existed possibly 3,000 years ago, or some portion of the civilization, not necessarily the entire civilization. Unfortunately, the conclusion that was drawn, you will still find that into even the pro-Indic history circles of India, academia, outside academia, is that therefore people say, okay, Mahabharata war happened in 1200 BC. In drawing that conclusion, there is no relevance, no aspect of scientific acumen, no aspect of background knowledge, and no aspect of logical reasoning was employed. If there was a small element of background knowledge that was employed, and let's give that due to this team, it was the fact that the places that they dug around, for example, did the excavation, like say Kurukshetra area and Hastinapur and Mathura and Delhi and then Kausambi, those all places in some context are refers to Kurus, not the Kurus of the same time. In fact, we don't know Kurus of what time. And they found the pottery. But guess what? Right now, if you pull the dumps, so I'm saying, so there is this some logic, not logic, some background knowledge they used. And okay, we can give them 1 mark out of 100. That's it. They don't get any other marks. I'll just give you an example to make my point. Today, if you look at all the dumps, garbage collected from Kurukshetra, Mathura, Hastinapur, and Kausambi, you will find certain objects which are very, very similar. like plastic bags, even with a printed certain brand or something. Now, just because you found the same plastic bags in every place doesn't necessarily tell you that the Mahabharata war happened in our times. Now, let me tell you, there are some self-professed researchers. I don't know the researcher is the right word. They have tried to interpret Mahabharata text, and they only go for the text certain, because Mahabharata also has seen some variation when people make. There are different types of errors: transcription, transliteration errors, and so therefore they just take those erroneous statements, very few, and try to draw the conclusion. Their biggest conclusion is to say that my date is not correct. But what they end up showing, that they are claiming that Mahabharata is happening our times. I talked about the plastic bags. Somebody can actually, in their naivete, in their ignorance and arrogance, and just out of a hate for somebody, may reach these conclusions. Okay. Now, in this case, when Professor Bibilal and team did it, no, they had a sincere intentions. I think what was lost was not having the sense of a scientific acumen and logical reasoning, bringing together with something else that Krishna talks in Bhagavad Puran: Shruti, Pratyaksham, Aitiyam, Anumanam, Chatushtayam. For heaven's sake, we have to bring the Shruti, we have to bring the Smriti, we have to bring the Itihas, the Mahabharata text itself. It was never brought into this research effort. It was never brought, any context from Mahabharata text was never ever brought in this context. There is no description of this pottery or anything in the Mahabharata. And even if it was, that is not a guarantee, but at least now we are going in somewhat that direction. Just last point. Now, if you go to Wikipedia, you'll find the story, another twisted story. For example, if you look at the timing of this, forget the pottery, but all the civilizational evidence. And by the way, we are coming up with another small project, and we'll talk about that when it comes out. This civilizational aspect, and then eventually after post Mahabharata, which is 7,500 years ago and after, and also as the Saraswati started drying and so on, the third wave or fourth wave of out of India migration began, and folks started going into these areas, the north, further north, the old Kuru. But of course, if you go to Wikipedia and the Western consensus that Adityaji you talked about, yeah, they are thinking this is from where the folks came to India and the whole Aryan nonsense. Okay. But just let me take quick example, second example of archaeology. I'll keep it short because I took longer on that previous one. This is Sinauli, the place in Haryana, Rajasthan, somewhere. Sorry, Haryana, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh. Sorry, this is in Uttar Pradesh, close to Haryana border, where they found a chariot. They dated it to what? 1800 BC. Okay, let's call it simplicity, 2000 BC. So 4,000-year-old chariot. What does this tell you? Archaeology evidence, as I said, is useful. It tells you that there were people who were aware of chariots 4,000 years ago in India. It does not tell you anything whether the chariots existed before or not. Okay, it doesn't tell you anything whether they continue to use these kind of chariots afterwards or not. Unless we find evidence, we may not know. We can make some guesses. That's perfectly fine. But I'll tell you a disaster for this. Just like that painted graver pottery, they found, this is not that long ago, they found a chariot in Sinauli that was dated to say 2000 BC, so 4,000 years ago. Next day, everyone in the newspapers, everywhere, and even in so-called Indic research circle, even the pro-Indic research circle, everyone in their all naivete ignorance, I wouldn't say arrogance, but utter ignorance, started talking Mahabharat war in 2000 BC. Why? Because they found a chariot. What that chariot has to do with the Mahabharata? Oh, there were chariots in Mahabharata. Do you know what it tells you? The people who are talking about this, the newspapers who are reporting this thing in a very careless fashion, they have no sense whatsoever of scientific acumen. They have no idea about how the logically one should draw inference, how to properly draw conclusions. That's why this. Aditya, I'm going to move on to the next one. So if you want to add something on the archaeology, you can do that now.
No, good point. And I have one very common question. And I think you pointed in one of the earlier videos also. Some of these archaeological evidences can be on any level, like the layers of earth are there. So how do you determine like which one is the actual corresponding to that period which you're searching for?
Correct. No, good point. But what I would say is actually the layer in which it is found, rather that is used to date this. Now, how do you date something? You don't, I mean, there are many ways, like exposure of a stone, and I'll not go into the different methods in archaeology for dating, like thermoluminescence and whatnot. But the layer in which it is found, they have certain other assumptions, like how the layer built. So these are assumptions, and that's why archaeology will never give you a precise answer. Archaeology can, if at best, what it can give you is an approximate answer. But approximate answer for what? Approximate answer for when this chariot existed. It has nothing, and our audience must understand this. It has absolutely nothing, just based on the evidence, by the way, to do with the Mahabharata. It may or may not have anything to do with the Mahabharata, but that needs to be established. It was never established. Okay, I can tell you it cannot be established, by the way. Okay, based on when I looked at that evidence. But people are just writing articles. People are not just newspaper guys, ordinary folks. I mean, I get these emails. Do you know what, Aditya, I do? It is such a irritating, tiring, frustrating people when people send this without doing their own research. I use this to basically mute them, block them, ignore them, so that I don't have to read another email from them or another Facebook message. They don't understand what a waste of time. They are wasting their own time, and they're not even reading it, and they're wasting somebody's time. This archaeology evidence has a great value, guys, but do not confuse by drawing the wrong conclusions. Okay, so that's the point. Let's go to the next one. Another one, the tradition and sampradaya. Now, does the tradition and sampradaya has a value? Absolutely. In many places, let's look at the Wikipedia definition. Why do I bring Wikipedia? People think like suddenly I have something against Wikipedia. Well, I have a lot against Wikipedia. My point is, for ordinary things, Wikipedia actually does provide a decent information. Just my point, because of their extremely arrogant bias against Indian civilization, do not donate to them. That's my point is, this is a very non-violent way of responding to their arrogance and dogma when it comes to the information about Indian civilization. The point is, so let's just take a Wikipedia definition. A tradition is a belief or behavior passed down within a group, and so on and so forth. I'll quickly come to the last one. While it is commonly assumed that tradition have an ancient history, in some cases actually they do, many traditions have been invented on purpose, whether that be political or cultural, over short periods of time. I'll take one example, Aditya, that just recently, we are right now what? Magha Shukla Ekadashi today, I think. Okay. If you just go 4 or 5 days back, I mean, that was a Magha Shukla Ashtami. And, there were all, of course, typical tweets in Facebook. Yeah, oh, okay, this is a Bhishma Ashtami and so on. Now, that is, of course, we should celebrate. But understand, I mean, those people who care for the historical truth, others, if you are doing it in a Shraddha fashion, yeah, please enjoy, do the right thing, do Upavas and do all that. But if you're looking for a historical truth, then the Magha Shukla Ashtami has absolutely nothing, zero, nada, to do with the Bhishma Nirvana. That is that last line. Sometimes it can be built in over a very short period of times. And in case of Magha Shukla Ashtami, we actually have a historical evidence as to how short that tradition is. Okay, that tradition is less than 400 years old. It started with a Nilakantha Chaturdhara of Kashi, who misinterpreted many of the shlokas. Now, his intention was, by the way, very right. Okay, his intention was correct. He was trying to make sense of this jigsaw puzzle that Mahabharata evidence is. And whatever he did, or the errors he made, actually benefited later researchers of last 130, 140 years to actually make progress. All of their research helped me to arrive at the correct date of 5561 BCE. So we are indebted to these all researchers, including Nilakantha Chaturdhara. But in his interpretation, he came up with this Magha Shukla Ashtami, and then it started, and that is a 400-year-old tradition. Historically, that is not correct. But some of the things can happen like this. The humorous thing, Aditya, I will tell you, is this. Magha Shukla Ashtami, which happened like 4 days ago, 3-4 days ago, it is celebrated as a Bhishma Nirvana, passing away of a Bhishma. Now today, Magha Shukla Ekadashi is celebrated as a day, remember, 4 days after Bhishma passed away. Now that's why I'm telling you how it is not a historical truth. 4 days or 3 or 4 days after, so Ashtami, Navami, Dashmi, Ekadashi, so I'm saying 3 or 4 days after. Today, Magha Shukla Ekadashi, in a traditional sense, in a Sampradaya sense, you can say, is celebrated as the day when Bhishma recited Vishnu Sahasranam to Yudhishthir. Okay? 3 or 4 days after Bhishma passed away. Now, if you use scientific acumen, if you use logical reasoning, if you use the background knowledge, then you know there is something wrong with this. And if you study, the answer comes out clear. In fact, what Mahabharata tells you is that the day Bhishma recited Vishnu Sahasranam to Yudhishthir, that is the same day Krishna recited Shiva Sahasranam to Yudhishthir and everyone present there. From that day, Bhishma spent additional 50 days on the bed of arrows, on a Sharashaya, leading to the day of winter solstice, Uttarayan, and that is when there was a Bhishma Nirvana. So from the day of like today, what tradition celebrates as the day of Vishnu Sahasranam recitation by Bhishma to Yudhishthir, additional 50 days has to go historically, correctly speaking, before the day of winter solstice. What this tells you is that a traditional belief also allows you, it works as a wonderful seed, initial condition for us to do research and find out if it is consistent with the other evidence. But by itself, you cannot take it blindly and try to justify. But there are some, again, self-professed researchers who are trying to do it. And again, I would say, in all fairness to them, although that is very dogmatic what they're trying to do, but some of them are hardworking, by the way, and their research, although will take some people on the wrong track for a while as far as the Mahabharata dating is concerned, for example, but some of the things that they are finding out, or they may find out, actually will lead to some useful information for other aspects of our Indian civilization, or actually world civilization. So yeah, people putting efforts is good, as long as it's not ridden by dogma, or as long as it's not ridden by raga dvesha moha, because they hate somebody, some other claim, they hate somebody else, they are attached to some certain thing, certain sampradaya, certain tradition, or because of their lack of intellect. So that's the last part, is not in their hands, I suppose. Actually, it is in their hand. Patanjali would say, Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, Purvakam. You can, through tapasya, improve your intellect. Now, why did I mention this? Because the tradition is what most common folks relate to, and it's not their fault. But they should be aware that they cannot take the traditional belief. It's perfectly fine for celebration, and they should go ahead with it. Just like Jesus' birthday is celebrated in Christian tradition on 25th of December. It doesn't matter whether Jesus was born on 25th of December or not. Actually, we know that was decided as a consensus, the Christian leadership consensus at the Nicene Council of Nicaea in 3rd or 4th century. Fine. Again, what was it? It was a Uttarayan celebration, by the way, which they took it from the native European tradition, Egyptian tradition, the local tradition. Of course, Indian tradition also has Uttarayan. That's a different subject. But they should not, our folks who take tradition for celebration purpose should not confuse that with a historical reality. Some cases it can be, most cases it is not. However, the use of it is that it provides a seal. Now, this frustration that Adityaji, that I'm discussing with you, that people just blindly taking a tradition and then trying to justify with all kinds of, all kinds of humorous things, humorous non-existent evidence, but pretending that it is evidence. It is so frustrating, but I will tell you, this is not only frustration of me, or this is not a frustration of our times. The lines that I have written below there are from Samartha Ramdas Swami, okay, the guru of Raja Shivaji, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. What does he write? He says, see, this is a frustration. I mean, the frustration he felt 400 years ago. This is from his Dasabodh. Samanya lokan se jnana to avaghatsa anuman. Ordinary people, most of them, whatever the knowledge they claim is just somebody's opinion. In this case, Anuman, the way Samartha Ramdas Swami is employing, in the sense of an opinion. Diksha Dandakache Lakshana Yenechi Pade. This is very important. Diksha and Dandaka. Many ordinary people, what do they follow that as a truth? Like what their guru might have said, what some person in authority would have said. But we know in our Darshana Shastra, Nyaya Darshan Shastra, authority fallacy. A person in a position of authority, same thing with modern science. I mean, people can listen to Richard Feynman's lecture. Doesn't matter who the hell it was, what is the person's name, how important that name is, how far he or she is decorated, doesn't matter. If whatever that person is claiming, if it doesn't match with the evidence, it is wrong. Okay, that's how, one liner Richard Feynman would say that. Diksha Dandakache Lakshana. Then people to come with this tradition, sampradaya. Oh, in my sampradaya, it is said like this. Yeah, it may be right, it may be wrong. We discussed that last time, how to think properly. Okay, it's something, just because it is said, it can be valid, it can be invalid. How are we going to decide? We are going to decide with the pratyaksha. Quickly, nave kona sa manave, samanya sa kai thave, kona sa manave kiti manuni. You write these books. Why? So that people can read it. But what do? They don't read it. They ask the question which is already answered in the book. So how many people you are going to respond? How many people you are going to say no? Do your best, ignore them, block them, mute them in the modern terminology, and move on with your work. Okay, so if you want to interrupt me on the tradition, sampradaya, your thoughts, your agreements, disagreements with me, Adityaji, that will be great, before we go to the quickly last one.
Nilesh, one of the things about the traditions is that the traditions have protected Sanatan Dharma.
Correct. I agree 110%, by the way.
Because because they are the basis of warriors.
Yes.
Great example is Shivaji Maharaj. Great example is Maharaj Ranjit Singh. Very few people glorify Maharaj Ranjit Singh, but after Maharaj Ranjit Singh left, it was Shivaji Maharaj who controlled the entire world. I mean, from the Indian perspective.
Yeah.
Ranjit Singh ji came after Shivaji Maharaj.
Right.
So the traditions give the faith to defend the culture.
Absolutely.
Most of the traditions don't comment on the actual dates or something, but they focus on the faith aspect. Where generally they don't comment on. Even Madhvacharya said 5,000 years back, 4,000 years back. Everybody says that. So they don't focus too much on the dates, but they focus on the message.
Yeah. I agree with you. And in fact, see, because you brought up Madhvacharya and he's saying 4,300 years before him was the time of Mahabharata. And that again, so what is he doing? Let's assume that he's in the 12th century, let's not even debate that date, So 12th century, he is putting together what is a great work that Acharya is doing. He's putting together the best of the knowledge that is available at that time and is documenting it in a Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya. Okay. But just like he analyzed in a very methodical fashion whatever knowledge was available at that time, as a guru, his expectation from his disciples is that they do the same. Exactly. But many of them take it blindly. I'm not saying all. Actually, I am interacting with some of their ashram, or what you can call their branches of Madhvacharya, and we are having very intelligent, very interesting discussions. They are helping me a lot, and I'm getting a lot of insights, which the insight helped me in deciding Krishna's time, 5633 BC to 5525 BC. Madhvacharya says Krishna lived for 108 years, 107 plus years. Now, how did he arrive at that? I don't know. I mean, he would have had access to many other grantha possibly that we don't have access to. They may be lost, right? Yeah. So tradition. So this was not what I just said in that context, Adityaji, was not a attack on tradition or a sampradaya. In fact, what it was, just like what you said, they have a certain focus. They maintain the spirit, and that was used by many. Absolutely. I mean, so imagine, I call them preserver of tradition in my other framework, because they preserved, you and me can talk about it.
Exactly.
And because of that, we can research about it. So they did an absolutely phenomenal job, and we can be only grateful to them, nothing else. Okay. My specific point, and you understood it, of course, was to emphasize that one should not take tradition blindly, because see, they can take even a traditional aspect blindly for their own sadhana, nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong.
It doesn't create havoc for others. It doesn't create confusion. It doesn't create vikalpa.
That's right.
But suddenly when they bring that and they will say, oh, but according to Sampradaya, they says 3101 BC. Why are you saying 5561 BC? And my response will be, because remember, that is a traditional belief there. What I am telling you is based on evidence of Mahabharata. Have you looked at my evidence? Have you compared with the two? This is when the discussion will happen. Otherwise, it's absolutely fine. As I said, today, Bhishma Ekadashi, in reality, do you know what? It was a Bhishma, it was a Ekadashi when Vishnu Sahasranam was recited, 11th December 5561 BC. It was a day of Ekadashi. But it so happens it was a day of a Magha Vadya Ekadashi and not the Shukla Ekadashi, like the way we celebrate. So one must understand the delta between the traditional celebration versus the historical accuracy. That is the point of that. Okay. And let's get to the epigraph. And I'll go fast through this. And then again, I want you to ask about this too. Many, I don't know if many, but when everything else is lost in the sense, not because the evidence doesn't exist, but because that kind of evidence goes against. So, for example, internal Mahabharata evidence, if one uses it and brings it together in the format of Shruti, Smruti, Pratyaksha, Maitiyam, Anumanam, Chatushtayam, it will lead them, Adityaji, only to 5561 BC, no other date. Now, are there some verses, because few verses out of that 300 plus astronomy evidence or 200 plus Saraswati evidence, or just go on and on, like the genetic evidence. Are there some verses, are there some evidence pieces which will go, which will not match with 5561 BC? Absolutely. Because Mahabharata has gone through various changes, and all one has to do is go and look at a Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute's critical edition. For every single verse that is quoted there, all the various variations, changes because of transcription, transliteration, errors that has occurred when people are copying from one palm leaf to another palm leaf and so on. People making errors because of the person who is writing, that person's lack of knowledge, sometimes a mistaken reading, all these errors. Yeah, you see those variations. The beauty is, in spite of that variation, 90 plus percent, 99% of evidence leads to 5561 BC. There are going to be some exceptions. Again, the lack of scientific acumen, lack of logical reasoning leads some people, okay, and they are there in social media and discussion groups, to take this one stray reference and use that to claim that Nilesh Oak's date is wrong. Well, hold on, Aditya ji, you and me discussed that. It's not Nilesh Oak's date. I might have worked on it to put the puzzle together. It is the Bhagwan Vyasadev's evidence in the Mahabharata. When you are rejecting, I say 300 plus evidence, you deliberately, arrogantly, ignorantly, and naivete, whichever the way and combination of it, pick one verse to say that this does not match with 5561 BCE. You are not fighting with Nilesh Oak. You are basically showing your lack of Shraddha into the Mahabharata text and therefore Vyasadeva. Now, does this one verse that doesn't match with 5561 BC is part of Mahabharata text? Yes, it is. Okay. And it can be for many reasons, just like that all the evidence is there for a reason, that all 300 plus evidence is there for a reason. So this verse, and now they will pull that verse, but when they try to analyze it and they cannot analyze it properly, that is the bigger problem. What does that verse says? If understood with using the grammar, using the words, using the translation, nirukta, everything, what does that say? And of course, the objective testing, if it's astronomical, using astronomy, or if it's about River Saraswati, using the geological data, hydrology data, morphodynamics of data, what does that say? That particular verse will say Mahabharata happened today, the astronomy one. Now, I tell them, Aditya, so, okay, so do you accept? Is that your claim that Mahabharata is happening today? Now they just shut their mouth. They have no guts to talk about it. So this is what I'm talking about. So now what do they do? This is one aspect. Those people who are so gung-ho about determining the date of Mahabharata, and that's great. Okay, we need many more researchers like this. But when none of the, because they have a date in their mind, okay, that is called circular reasoning, but let's not go there. A priori, they have decided when they want to see Mahabharata happening. There is a problem with tradition also, traditional beliefs also. Okay, they cannot get out of that 3000 BC Manduka well, no, they cannot get out of it. But for entire Mahabharata is saying that, and remember, you said I have created a homework for you, Aditya, that I have given an open challenge. There is not even a single reference in the entire Mahabharata text, okay, which will allow anyone using scientific acumen, logical reasoning, objective testing to decisively arrive at any date 3000 BC plus minus 1000 years, any date from 2000 to 4000. This is a very crisp challenge. How difficult it is to falsify. It should be very easy to falsify. Okay, nobody has come up. Now, those people who are stuck there, what do? They decide not to use any evidence from the Mahabharata text to determine the dating of Mahabharata. Why? Because it goes against their predetermined date, which usually falls 3000 BC plus minus 200 years. So now some of them have taken recourse to the graphic evidence, and many other Indic researchers, for reasons beyond my imagination, just show, yeah, but I'm confused. I don't understand. So what's wrong with it? Well, I am not going to waste my time, I meaning Nilesh, to get rid of your deliberate ignorance. It's a deliberate ignorance. This is what I want to talk last point quickly. Now, just like we talked of archaeology, we talked of tradition. This is epigraphic evidence. This is like in old, I forgot now, I can't read. This is in some Tamil script or a Brahmi script, or, script in between the IVC and Brahmi or so on. This is some script there, the Brahmi could be different, Tamil, old Kannada, and so on and so forth. Okay, various scripts around India, right? This is a Gupta Brahmi or Gupta script. When something is engraved in a stone or in a copper plate or at some temple, what does that mean? It simply means the information that was engraved at the time when the copper plate was created or a epigraph was created in stone or whatever material at the temple or some other place, documenting some information. Where did that information came from? That information simply came from whatever was known at that time. That would have meant, again, Shruti, Smriti, Pratyaksha, Aitiya. Okay, whatever they knew, whatever they could access through the books, whatever were their beliefs, okay, whatever possibly, as you said, Adityaji, the consensus of the the professors of that time. It could be any of that. And again, our Darshan Shastra tells us, what does that mean? That information, that's great. It's a good seed point for us to begin our research, but that by itself is not to be taken blindly. It may be valid, it may not be valid. How do we decide it's a valid? Again, we have to go to Pratyaksha, and not just Pratyaksha, because we are trying to connect to some historical event, right? So therefore, again, Shruti, Smriti, Pratyaksham, Aitiyam, Anumanam, Chatushtayam. If you don't do that, Pramaneshu Anavasthanat, okay, your knowledge is always going to be unstable. And not only that, Pramaneshu Anavasthanat, Vikalpat Savirajyate. You keep on increasing the confusion, delusion of the masses in the society. And my request to them, not that they will listen, please don't do that. So that was my last point, the bonus material. I think we went over time there, Adityaji. So unless we have a time, we'll not go through bonus material. It's perfectly okay to skip that. I'll quickly do the summary, and then I want you to say something about the epigraph, your thoughts and objections and so on. Quick summary. Archaeology evidence can be useful. It is useful. Unfortunately, in most cases, it is employed to draw utterly meaningless or foolish conclusions. I discussed 2-3 different cases. Now, these foolish conclusions can be deliberately drawn, but it can be also because of ignorance, the ignorance of the scientific acumen and logical reasoning. The beliefs of tradition sampradaya also provide us with seed conjectures, seed evidence to initiate the investigation. Very useful. Okay, so preservation of tradition is very, very useful. Aditya, you mentioned in the context of like a faith. But I would say even it is useful in the context of a history, understanding our civilization in the context of the truth, knowing the Sat. Unfortunately, if the beliefs are not used properly, which is to say it's not validated and just taken blindly and used to fight with somebody else who is doing the work in a darshana fashion, then unfortunately such beliefs are confused with the truth, and then the problem begins. As an individual, you can take a belief as a truth if that satisfies your purpose and a need, nothing wrong with it. But don't start pushing them on others, or don't use them to argue with others, because the belief on one side and a pratyaksha on another side, okay, we just don't even have the right ingredients to start a discussion. Don't do it. Epigraphic evidence can be useful. Again, it is useful. It tells us what some person was thinking at that time. Some useful information may be encoded. Very, very useful. Not unlike other archaeology evidence, just like archaeology evidence is useful. Unfortunately, this evidence is also employed, and enough examples, if anyone wants to say, employed to draw utterly meaningless and foolish conclusions, again, deliberately or ignorantly. In all three cases, it is important to note that those who make use of this evidence show lack of evidence in the wrong fashion, I'm saying, to draw the wrong conclusions, show lack of scientific acumen. This is something I have seen for 30 plus years. They don't use proper background knowledge. Many of them are lazy enough that they will not do the required tapasya. And some of them who actually do hard work, but then again, they lack scientific acumen, logical reasoning skills, and actually create more confusion, more delusion for the society. So with that, I'll stop sharing. Aditya, back to you. And if we have a time, you can ask me on the epigraph, or actually raise your objections, because that's how people learn more and people learn better.
No, one of the very common questions epigraphy is like people can plant it also. Just like people can make it, but I don't doubt it because of the antiquity of the plate itself.
Correct.
Still, people can plant it also, and sometimes people can, like you just mentioned, people can mention based on their understanding, and they may not have. See, our traditions always say, scrutinizingly study the Vedic Shastra.
Perfect, right? You have to quote next time the Sanskrit verse for that,
Exactly, I'll quote it. So, scrutinizingly, Shukdev Goswami says, Goswami says that if you want to arrive at Vidya, then you have to scrutinizingly study and make a nishtha in your own mind that is right.
Correct.
From all the evidences that you have.
Yes.
And that's how your faith increases. Like, if I say something, it has no relevance. But Arjun also quotes Asita Devala Vyasa Swayam Eva Bravishime. Like, he also quotes Narada. Correct. So that is a very, like, just like a law book. If you don't quote an earlier case, you cannot arrive at a new judgment. New judgment will take longer now.
Yeah, that is the background knowledge, right? Shruti Smruti. Yes. That is the background knowledge. Without the context, you cannot do this, right? Yeah. And so 2 points you made quickly on that epigraph. You said that it can be planted. And the second one, what did you say? That, it shows the understanding, beliefs of the people who created the epigraph, right? Correct. Again, both are useful. The first one I will say, and humorously, of course, that you can say all the epigraphs are planted. Now, take that as a humorously, right? Because somebody said, let me write it down and put it on the wall, right? So I don't know if you can see, so for example, see, this is an epigraph there, Okay. Actually, I'll tell you how it is planted. So it says, it's from Emory University, Nilesh, for highest academic achievement, modular executive MBA program. Okay. On that one. Now see, what is the value of it really? Okay, other than making me sound like a very intelligent person, right? If somebody reads it. Now nobody comes to my study, so nobody reads it. The only reason it is there, and I'll tell you. So that's how sometimes the epigraphs may get created. The only reason it is there is when I did it and they gave it to me. They gave it to me. Actually, I won 8 awards. I'll take this opportunity to talk about myself. Out of 11, I won 8. And this executive program, MBA program. That one, and there is one more here on this side. They gave it to me already framed, and that is why it is on the wall. Okay, so one time, the guy who works around my house, he came there and he says, "Oh yeah, everything is sitting in the box." I said, "If you want to put it on the wall," so he did it. My point is that's a planted epigraph. Okay. Now, is this truthful? Yes, it is truthful. But now let's look at it. The highest achievement, academic achievement. The reason I'm saying that is like I was number one in the class, you know. Now, honestly, this is a relativistic thing. In real life, that doesn't mean much, right? Finally, the proof is in the pudding. You know, if I'm claiming a highest academic achievement, it should be reflected through my works, through my behavior, and everything else. Otherwise, it's meaningless.
That's and the second point was the traditions. Now the in also in the and I really like the epigraphic. It makes my faith immediately. At least itna to purana hai.
Huh.
This is old this much.
Yeah, yeah, correct. For example, now say Shankaracharya, right? So what does Shankaracharya? So we'll not go into uh, the discussion or a controversy of his timing. I have nothing to say about it. See, this is also another important point that our researchers need to understand. They don't have to have a say on everything.
That's right.
Okay, for example, anyone comes and asks me, what do you think about Gupta, Maurya? I said, you know what, 2000 BC afterwards, I don't take interest, because of my work. But sorry, you were saying something and I forgot the point. But if you are over time, we can stop, and that's perfectly fine.
I was saying that most of the people, they are actually, I also missed the point now. So anyway.
See, that's the fun. People should listen to it, right? Because which is what we don't take ourselves seriously. We should not take ourselves seriously, and don't just come here and pretend to be professorial. I mean, just we have to get rid of that BS, so people can see this in real action.
And one common thing you have experienced, I have experienced, that people, they will follow their own life course based on their karma. You cannot force them to learn anything or unlearn anything. Even my students also I have seen.
Correct.
They don't understand that I cannot force them. I'm not a church. I'm not going to call them that do it.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is, this is the best way. If you want to do it, it's up to you. If you don't want to do it, but I will continue what I have to do.
Absolutely. And that's why this format is good. This format is like, when we were in India, we used to call it Akashvani as a metaphor. The thing is, Akashvani, or the radio, does its thing. Whether you want to listen to it or you don't want to listen to it, is in your hands. You just stop this radio on your channel, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I got the title of this video, Akashvani, and then
well, all our episodes are Akashvani. It's up to them to decide whether they want to get something out of it or not.
No, more and more people are watching it now. And people who would like to subscribe, it's a playlist called 5561 on Sattology. They can subscribe to the playlist. And while you're driving, you can see from beginning to end everything that we have in more than 70 shows.
Yeah.
And in between, we have also added Rupa Bhattiji also in that, even though she has a different playlist. But between that, because it corresponds to our conversations.
Right. And let me add one more suggestion to you. Because you may have access to technology with your small team. If number of these, because people request me and I said, yeah, I'll let guys like if those can be converted to like, what is that other thing they call, just only to hear, like audio. A podcast. Audio, only audio, because many people tell me that they listen to it while driving. So something, a food for thought. I mean, I don't know how difficult it is to do it.
No, most of these shows are available on SoundCloud also. People can subscribe.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm not into technology, but just I get a lot of requests like that, and so I'm just passing it on to you.
SoundCloud, we that we have been doing this for 17, 18 years now. Sattology is like, we didn't have the name Sattology, but we were doing the same thing for 18 years. In the US. So our SoundCloud goes to 30 to 40,000 people a day. And there are more than 4,000 sessions recorded on that. 4,000. So we have a huge Sattology. People just think we are a YouTube channel. We are not YouTube channel. We are huge behind the back. This is the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
But anyway, with your love and support and Nilesh, your blessings and everybody's blessings, we will grow more, because we all have to debunk mythology every day. A lot is going on. So thank you so much, Nilesh, as usual. Wonderful. And I know some people are laughing at our show because we made a lot of fun of a lot of people. And so thank you all so much. And do comment. That is more important for us. Do comment and share. And namaste and thank you.
Namaste. Thank you.